Okay, so here it is. It's a beautiful afternoon here in Israel, and I have the honor and pleasure to host Rotem Kopel from ABILITY Neurotech. Rotem, good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Thank you for inviting me.
Well, thank you for
Pleasure
having
to
us.
be here.
It's not every day that we talk to a person who was a challenger to Elon Musk, right?
We start with that.
We can
It,
start with that and finish with
we
that,
can, we can
or
start with
ignore
that.
that.
No, actually, it's a good way to start. I think that it's a privilege. I think to be in a field that used to be an acronym for many years, and when we said BCI, only people that are really deep into neurotech would know what it means. And I think thanks to Elon Musk today, when you say BCI, many people knows what it means. So I think that he brought a very big focus to a field that used to be a niche, and today we are really looking at companies, at valuation, at investment, at interests, at that podcast. So I think that creating a focus to a field that would actually have a big impact into healthcare in the future. I thank everyone that does that, including Elon Musk.
I have absolutely no doubt that you are going to have an immense impact, and certainly Neuralink was one of the original pioneers. So, how did you decide to start on this path, and what was the point in time where you decide this is something I must do?
Um, my way into Ability Neurotech was a bit different. I think that when I started my career, I wasn't doing anything around neurotech. I was actually an electrical engineer, studied in Tel Aviv University, working in telecommunication for many years, developing modems and different chips and different algorithmics and different ways to actually communicate, but let's say the standard way of communication. And my path after, let's say, 10 or 15 years led me to the understanding that you could do the same things, but actually you could create different impact in different fields. And I just shift my capabilities, similar capabilities from telecommunication to actually working systems of the brain. So that was a first shift into a different perspective of systems. And my specific path towards Ability Neurotech, I was not involved in the technology development for many years. That has been something that was done at the VIS Center in Geneva, which is a translational neuroscience center. And I've been working with that technology for the last year and a half, trying to assess what that technology could do beyond the research center, whether that technology is fit into combining it with a different company, whether that technology could be fit into taking that to actually different application, not specifically neurotech. And after examining many different possibilities, advised quite strongly for the VIS that that technology should be a standalone company and should actually go for the market. And I'm very pleased to have that convincing phase successfully, and was offered to manage the company and to spin it out from the VIS into the industry. So that's
Well,
been my role into neurotech a bit, and my position specifically with Ability Neurotech.
that's it's quite a story. And so, where are you right now? Are you in the lab? Are you in the clinic? Are you in the boardroom still? Where are you holding right now? I saw a picture of a device on the website. It looks
So,
pretty scary to me, but tell me all about that. Where you're holding right now.
so today, actually, we're about to go to first in human. It means that for the last 8 years, the technology has been developed in the VIS Center, in that facility, that unique setup of Translational Neuroscience Center. And we are about to finish the verification stage that creates all the necessary validation and safety tests, and to make sure that everything is aligned to the necessary steps into going first time and testing a device in human. So that's the phase that we are at. We're finalizing those final checkups and steps and tests, which is quite a rigorous phase. We would be finishing that over the coming few months. And Q1 26, we're expected to be at different two setups in Europe that would test our device first time with ALS patients. So it's the final stages of a company going from the research, from the validation into clinical impact.
And so at the beginning of 2026, please God, you're going to be in clinical trials. That's, well, what a journey. So, if we go, I'm going to ask you like a typical interview question, which they always ask people, they always say, where are you going to be, where you see yourself in 5 years, 3 years. So understanding that you're starting your first in human clinical trial in about six to 7 months. So let's say 3 years from now,
Yeah.
where do you see yourself? Where are you going to be in 3 years?
So I think that BCI is a very, very, very unique field that we are starting to understand what would be the necessary steps into regulatory phase to make sure that we don't just do very interesting research or very nice clinical work, but we would actually have products. In 3 years from now, what we expect to see is that Ability's devices would start to be in pivotal trial. That would be the final stage in order to actually matured and validated into regulatory approval at the US in order to actually address the market. So the path is 3 years time would be really the time for pivotal work.
So what indications?
Today we're looking at indications that are very specific for patients that would understand that there is a risk to actually using the device because it's new device, because it's going to be actually a surgery, minimally invasive, but still a brain surgery. And we believe that there would be a very specific patient population that could see the benefit that would be so significant that they would understand that the benefit would be higher than the risk. So the patient that we're looking at are patients with a very acute stages of ALS, spinal cord injury, brainstem stroke, patients that has lost various functionality, mostly communication and speech. And those patients today, let's say an ALS patient, unfortunately today we could not offer them a lot. There isn't a specific cure that would change the trajectory of the disease. It's a very acute stages that would lead eventually to a locked-in situation. And we see in different interviews that we're having with those patient population that the one thing that they want to maintain for the longest time is actually the ability to communicate. So the fact that they would be losing different functionalities of movement, let it be hands, let it be mobility, it's something that they wish that it would be different. But the one thing that is frightening for most of those patients is the locked-in stage. So having the perspective for those patients that prior to being ventilated, so in not a very acute stage, there would be an option to be implanted with an Ability device and to be trained to actually communicate with their thoughts, with their intentions. They could create a communication channel via a computer, or even much more sophisticated with that, they could translate their intentional speech into actually a real-time speech. So they could think about things and the device could be actually saying what they thought. So for those patients in a very unique situation, we believe that they could see the merits of that device and they would be actually eager to have that communication channel being kept open, even though the disease would progress eventually. So we see patients that are at a chronic stage without any solution for their very acute communication option. And those would be the first patients that we believe would benefit the most from what we call today a BCI.
And actually, it's like, how far can you go with this? I'm just so curious. I mean, you implant it, it's a communications channel. I get it. It's like, you know, somehow getting into the speech centers of the brain and translating electrical signals and then translating the electrical signals into speech. That's sort of my rough understanding of what you do. Is that correct?
It's very much correct, with one small thing that I would maybe emphasize a bit differently. You could record different things in the brain, right? As you said, it's at the end, it's electrical signals. But what we record is actually areas that are more related to muscle preparation. So when we think about speaking, we are preparing our muscles to do that. So when we are intentionally having that moment of planning to say something like what we do now, our brain is doing tons of different calculation and estimation and predictions to what
Right.
would be the next thing we would do in order to have the most efficient way of actually executing what we are planning to execute in general, not just speech. And when we are planning to speak, there is a specific preparation of muscles around the mouth. So our lips and our tongue and our vocal cords would be prepared to say something very specific. So those muscle preparation of pronunciation of any sound, like ah versus e versus o,
Oh,
those muscles will be very different. And we are mostly recording those muscle preparation. So the patterns that we are recording and then decoding is what are the muscle preparation for pronunciation around that that section in the brain. It's a very specific area in the brain that we know how to map, and we know how to map those muscles into sounds.
so it's like, if I remember a little bit of my neuroscience, and the planning is in one place and the execution is in other
Right.
places,
Yeah.
isn't it? Right. So
Yeah.
you're actually not looking at the planning part, you're looking at the execution, right?
Exactly. Exactly. And what you do is, even for patients that are actually paralyzed, so they do not have the actual execution due to different conditions, the way that the brain is still working is that most of that activity is very similar. Even though they cannot execute it, the brain activity is very much prepared to execute it. So
Yeah.
even with patient that has lost the capability or would lose the capability of actually producing speech, we could still predict what they intended to say.
Right.
And in addition to that, just to make sure that we have all options open, because even when we communicate, sometimes we choose to pick up the phone and have a conversation. Sometimes I choose to just pick up my phone and text someone. Sometimes I pick the option of doing a very direct ask. So communication in general, we look at it for patients that we want to create different ways of communication. Maybe what they want is just controlling a computer and making sure that the time they spend by themselves, they could switch up channels in their television, or they could choose the right Netflix series that they want to see, or to ask for water, or to dim the light, or to change the temperature of the room. So I think that when we look at patients, we look at what do they need in order to create a controlled environment. Sometimes it's something very concrete, and sometimes it could vary it from and ask for a nurse, to controlling the environment, to creating a full communication. So we create a system that could cover really the needs of the patients. We understand what they need, or it's not that we understand. We have different patient advisory board to make sure that what we are designing actually is fit for patients, and not just because we could do it technology. That means that that's going to be the solution. And with patients, we design a much more holistic solution that would not be just a very nice, I don't know, a very nice paper, but
Right.
actually could be something that they would be that would change the way that they live their life.
For sure. I mean, and it's like, you're actually looking at different modes. So it's multimodal. It's not just, operating a computer, getting a sound out there. And I remember reading that, if I understand correctly, if you once had the ability to speak, that ability is still there, even if you cannot execute it, right? That's
Correct. It goes to many different functions that we have in the brain. Even if we lose some capabilities, some external capabilities of different functionality, the brain is still wired in a way that could allow for those activity to happen. So we're creating a bridge, if you want, because the brain is intact in the way, mostly intact in the way that it functions, and sometimes the extremity is where we are losing different capabilities.
I'm going to ask you kind of almost a personal question.
Right.
But what's been the hardest punch that someone has thrown you? And was it a learning experience for you?
I think that the hardest punch for me and is the the internal, very strong understanding that what we develop here is much more than what we just described now. And there is we look at a technology that could be used in so many different ways. And the hardest punch for me is actually when people are seeing just a first step, and by that they are not. It's hard for them to give it even a try because the first step is maybe very specific. Maybe because the first step is a very specific patient population or a very specific use. And when we look at the technology and we see that actually what we are creating is a sensing mechanism, and when you start to sense something new and let it be the brain, what we do today and what we think of BCI today is just the first step. And as a scientist or as a data scientist or as an engineer, we understand that when we create a system, at the end, the system would be telling us different things. Today, it could create an ability to create communication, but tomorrow we could be recording other things and we could extend the capabilities of the system, and judging it just by the way it is today. That's for me the hardest part, because we could really see what it could serve at the second, at the third, and at the end step, and having that trajectory for the future, and sometimes assessing something with a very specific view. For me, it's the hardest.
Yeah, and I can see how what you've invested you've invested so much time in this. Has been what? How many years?
8 years.
8 years. So you invested 8 years in this project, and then someone goes, okay, it's a big deal. It's just like, poking at what Stephen Hawking does with the straw. That's just a different kind of way. I can see that would be very annoying if someone would tell me that, at that point in time. So I get it. And well, now imagine that all of the stars line up for you. Okay, the capital flows. The regulators don't change their mind, or they don't put a new stumbling block in there. So, what are you going to build? I mean, you've talked about how first in human in 6 months. You've talked about going to pivotal trials in 3 years, or maybe 3.5 years, and but what are you building? I mean, I looked at the picture on the website. It was pretty scary for me. But I think, if I understand, this is just a very first version of the chip, and eventually one day it'll be something quite easy to just to you unfold a little flap on your scalp, and you put it in there, and it's done, right? Probably that's where you're going, no?
Um, I think that what we're building is something that it's not just us. I think it's the entire industry. We understand that when we see something, we could understand it better and we could amend different things. And today there are so many different diseases that let's just take mental health, for instance. There are so many unknowns around mental health, and what we are building is something that could do so that could look at the way that the brain is working in different ways. We could sense it differently. We could sense the electrical signals from various locations of the brain in a unique precision that today we don't have with today's machinery. let it be fMRI, let it be EEG. We're quite limited in how we understand the network analysis of different disease. And what we're testing is whether by sensing real time the brain better, could we by that be treating the brain in a better way? Imagine that we could predict a seizure rather than sense the seizure and see if we could amend it at the current moment. If we could start predicting seizures of epilepsy, of depression, we could understand how to treat patients better with better drugs. We could understand whether something is happening, and then we could adjust different stimulation to the brain. So by sensing the brain, we want to make sure that we could give the best treatment to different diseases today that were blocked.
Well, the brain is always predicting, right? Everything that happens is just always a prediction mechanism, right?
There is a lot of prediction. That goes to the efficiency way of sometimes we do wrong. Sometimes we predict and we take the wrong decisions. Predict, it doesn't mean that we take the right decisions.
Or we say the wrong thing. Your brain is predicting what is the right thing to say, and boom, you say the wrong thing, or you take the wrong step. You didn't mean to slip, but you slipped anyhow. So the brain is always predicting things, isn't it? So you're actually, if I'm trying to, I think I saw a paper a few months ago on using large language models to predict time series from EEG signals in the brain. I don't know if you saw that. And
I didn't see that.
it was like there was a lot of hoopla on it in social media, but it doesn't really mean much because it was very, very short sample. It was like 30 milliseconds, and the synapses, the neurons are predicting anyhow, so it's not like a big deal. But it was also, I thought, as an engineer, I thought it was kind of a bad application for large language models. I mean, you have so much better algorithms for predicting time series than a large language model. It's like, using just, the wrong tool to do something, I thought. But I just realized I had like an aha moment right now, is that if you have very good biosensing, then you can jack into the signals and you can predict based on the signals, because all of these electrical signals are a time series, right? You can jack into the time series with your biosensor and you can say, okay, this is what's going to happen and let's fix it. Okay, it could be going this way, but it should be going that way.
Yeah.
And or maybe, just being able to predict something. You might be able to have an early warning system for falling, to tell a person, say, you're about to trip, and it might, beep at you or something and say, or maybe even correct it. I don't know, but your ability to jack into the time series of signals is huge, I think. And now I'm beginning to understand. That's my aha moment for this podcast today.
I think that you asked me what do we build. I think that at the end, our area, we would have invasive devices for patients that are really chronic, that are very severe patients, and we would have maybe non-invasive for much more tolerable situation, and maybe would have things for the entire population, much more of a commercial devices. And I think that that's something that the ecosystem would eventually evolve into. But when we look at invasive, we're talking about patients. I don't foresee invasive devices today that are going to the entire population for recreation, to help us play better video games, or to do something that we as humans could do without any invasive devices. And I think that the unique part of the invasiveness is putting even an ethical border. We're saying if we go invasive, it really needs to be worth the while of the patient to actually go to the surgery. So when you look at BCI in general, and you were talking about EEG, you could do much more soft things with EEG because you do not require you do not demand any risk for patients. So you do not demand for yourself as a company to be very strict about what you give. But when you go invasive, that is a different ballgame. You have to make sure that what you do is actually clinically impact for patients. You have to improve something so dramatically that it should worth actually the procedure. So in our case, what we are looking at is really clinical impact for patients that today could not be served differently. And today we're looking at the most severe ones, but I think that at the end it would kind of tilt towards mental health, towards much more neurodegenerative disease, to things that are global that we do not know today how to address. Whether it's going to be a combination between what we call today BCI, so brain computer interface, into combining that with neuromodulation, probably there would be a merge between the two technologies, because you need to read and you need to stimulate. You need to do the bidirectional approach. And I think that's the direction we're after. Whether we could actually address different clinical work or different clinical patients that do not have any solution today, given a new tool, a new technology, a new way even to look at the brain. So think about that as the first time we have a window to the brain that is completely different to the scale or the information that we saw up until now. Could we have biomarkers that we could understand better? Do we have a progress of a disease that we could predict or monitor better? So when you have a tool, many times that new modality brings many different opportunities.
And I can see that, and I can see how the brain is sort of like a black box for us today, and being able to poke inside and get some data from inside the black box is hugely interesting. But you said something which kind of like just tripped me up a second ago. So until now you've been talking about biosensors. Now a second ago you said, well, actually stimulating, putting a signal back into the system. That's what you just said, right? If I heard correctly.
Yeah, today our device specifically is only one directional. It just reads and transmits out. But those devices could become bidirectional. So you could read and you could choose what and how and where do you stimulate back. And today you have different neurostimulators. You have deep brain stimulators, which treats essential tremor, different epilepsy, different disease types that would need a neurostimulator in the brain. And you have also on the external neurostimulators that are in the body. So for the bladder, you have neurostimulator that are actually tucking into the fact that we are running by chemical and by electrical signals as a species. And if you are creating a stimulator around areas that are working on electrical activities, you could interact with that. So you could create a change in that proximity of electricity around that area. So DBS is actually deep brain stimulation.
Yeah.
Those are ways that we are today stimulating the brain. So tomorrow, if you could sense better, you could predict better, maybe you could actually stimulate better.
And you can do DBS better. And there is an Israeli company that's been around for a while, hasn't there? I think they're one of their founders is an advisor of yours, isn't he? No?
No, one of our advisor actually is not of that company. There is Alpha Omega.
Yeah.
They're doing DBS, but they're doing it differently. But there are various ways today that DBS is trying to expand. And it could be that adding a new sensory ways into a DBS would actually create a big change.
Wow. So, I mean, it's sort of like a new frontier here.
We see that as ways of creating a kind of two different activities combining into one. So it could be that BCI would remain a BCI, kind of an extension to capacities or functions that we lost. So if we lost the capacity to speak, we could extend that with an external device. So it's one directional. Or we could actually create a bidirectional and not just extend it. We could extend, maybe do some of the complex calculation, but then actually infer inside and change something in. So more therapeutic rather than an enabler. So today we're an enabler device, and tomorrow BCI probably would converge into a therapeutic.
It'll be bidirectional. So not only reading, but also writing. So we'll have read and write. Yeah. So it's not just a flash drive, it's actually a disk, right? In that sense, if I use a crude analogy, I suppose. Whoa. That's it's not every day. I'm meeting some incredible people on the podcast. People who are putting brains on a chip, and people who are putting chips into brains like you. And well, all I can say is we're rooting for you, and
Thank you. Could I ask you actually one question? Because you asked the way that you started, you said you saw the device and it scared you. Could I could we maybe discuss that? Because I think that in one way, when we talk about the brain, we have that understanding that that's a black box. We understand that that's who we are. We understand that we have our personality inside, we have our wishes, we have our secrets, we have our future, we have our past. So it's kind of that majestic way of encapsulating our entire self into that tiny box that we call it brain. And sometimes when we feel that something would penetrate that, it scares us, right? That creates kind of an emotion that we would not have maybe if we would put a stimulator in the heart, for instance. So could I ask maybe back what was the hardest part of thinking about stimulating or recording our brains?
I think as an abstract way, and I'm a physicist by training, so it just made total sense that we should be able to do that. And it's a very, very interesting problem. And of course, the brain, though, is the most complex object in the universe.
Yeah.
And a lot of people don't realize that, how complex the brain really is. And when I saw the picture of the device on the website, I say, don't take this personally, okay, but I'm looking at it. I'm looking at it right now, okay. I said, God, that looks really crude, It's like, I thought it would be something a lot, something, you're working in Switzerland, I'm thinking of something really chic, something that looks like, was designed by Cartier or something like that, And but I understand you need the coil to detect electrical fields, and you need some processing power there to I guess to do A to D conversion. There's a lot of processing that needs to be done as close as possible to the signal. Otherwise, you lose it. It gets attenuated. I get that. So after I looked at it, I said, I don't really quite understand what they're doing, but I get some of the reasons behind the design. Um, I don't know that it's an interesting question because you're basically suggesting that maybe I looked at it and it kind of scared me that someone might put something like that in
I'm
my
asking.
brain.
I'm asking.
Yeah,
I'm
I
asking.
I wouldn't want something like that in my brain. But on the other hand, how big is it, by the way?
I don't have it with me.
No, but
It's the device itself is actually the implant is more than that size, so something around 6 centimeters, less than 5 millimeter thick,
5 millimeters. That's really, really thin.
it's
Okay.
extremely thin. That's why it's large because it's very thin. And the reason that we chose thin over size is that we wanted the device to be head mounted. So some of the options is to have a chest mounted device and to have wires that are actually running through the neck into the brain. And we understand that the quality of the signal would be severely degraded by that. And we understand that the robustness of having something that is actually functional through the neck creates a very unstable solution. And what we wanted is a device that would be very discreet. So when it's implanted, actually it takes the shape of the skull. So since it's less than 5 millimeter thick and it will be something around here after the ear, it means that it's something that you hardly see in patients. It's very, very thin, very discreet and following the shape. You don't even have to have any bone work on the skull in order to fix it in. So you don't have to create any curving to the skull. You just really put it on the skull, and only the electrodes are penetrating under the skull that goes actually on the surface of the brain. So the electrodes are the part that you should be very much looking into. How do you plan to put it in? how stable it is, how much does it create a good interaction with the different materials of the brain. And what you see, the device itself, the implant itself, is actually sitting under the skin and in a very shallow location. So it's not very small, but it actually doesn't take it doesn't go over, as you said, it's not crude. It's something that you put in a very shallow position.
5 millimeters is really thin, and I think maybe I didn't get that by looking at the picture.
We should improve our website. That was a
maybe
quick and dirty
find
work.
someone to someone to draw a picture. So you're actually not actually implanting the device, you're implanting electrodes, and the device is close to the electrodes, and it's actually using induction, I assume, to get the signals and take them out and process them. Well, so that's going to be a huge advantage over Neuralink, right?
We feel that there are few advantages, and it's even not just advantages. I think it's approach. Our approach is very different. Neuralink has electrodes that are penetrating. They're intracortical, so actually they're penetrating the brain. And when we look at signals that should be lasting to extract information for 10 years. So we don't want to have something that would be risking the brain or creating any scarring, any gliosis around it. So we believe that having electrodes that are on the surface of the brain rather than intracortical, so in the brain, we believe that that's something that would be much more stable in the signal quality, would be much more severe in the reaction, the reactivity within the brain tissue. So that's one approach that we took very different. A second approach is that we are actually transmitting all the data out. We don't do any pre-processing on the device. We have a very unique optical communication system that was designed within the ABILITY project, and we're transmitting 50 megabits per second out. So it means that everything we record, we're extracting. And since we are in that exploratory phase of understanding what do we sense about the brain, we felt that reducing the dimensionality and choosing what do we extract because it saves power, because it saves communication, because it's actually much more efficient, it's not what we should be doing today. We wanted to have all the information out, so we are recording raw data, we're transmitting raw data, to allow for the better decoding to develop, to allow for the better application, not to limit ourselves. What would be the application that we could be imagining tomorrow? Can we have biomarkers? Couldn't we have biomarkers? Do we see different correlation between different things that we didn't envision? So that richness of the data is something that is crucial to the development of what would be the second generation, what would be the second application, what could we learn about comorbidity of those population with other things. So that's a key part that we take in a very different approach. We do not have a battery. As you said, it's power inducted. So we have power that is coming from the wearable device to the implant, which means that patients that are implanted are staying with that implant for as much as they need. And Neuralink, for instance, they have battery, meaning they have to go and create the same surgery again to extract and to implant. It's a different approach. It's just a very different approach to any one of those solutions. But I have to say, being a fast follower after a company like Neuralink, it's a very, very good position to be in. They're creating all the discussion for the regulatory path, which is unclear. They're creating a different work with clinicians. It's not a very bad position.
Yeah, it's a great place to be, especially considering the social profile of Elon, right? So
Social, financial.
financial, social, and of course, they've been working on this for a really long time. So and just finally, it's just something which I just had a second aha moment, which is that really this is not just a single user device, because the data you're collecting, right?
Correct.
That's a network.
That's it.
And when you have 10 people, 10,000 people, 10 million people using ABILITY Neurotech, then you can have a network. and you can do a lot of stuff, really interesting stuff, cool stuff once you have a network. Isn't that true?
What you just said is so fundamental in the way we think about the company. And it's a big question for us. And it's a question we are actually discussing now, not just with ourselves, but with the entire community of scientists. Once we would have this data, how could we share it in a way that would be creating an enrichment for the entire research community, not just us as a company working our best algorithmics in order to have the best solution for a patient.
Right. No, for the work, for our community, right?
And we're looking for different ways of creating different collaborations. And as a company, we're very privileged to have a non-for-profit as a main shareholder in the company. And that kind of creates a different values that are injected into the company. When you have a VC that is the main shareholder, it comes with different set of questions. When you have a non-profit as the main shareholder, it comes with values. And we're actually benefiting from that position. It's a unique position for a company to actually create collaborations, to see who wants to collaborate with us, who wants to see how that data could be building a different understanding into the brain, into different functionality, into things that we didn't see up until today. We have discussions about depression. We have discussions about comorbidity with ALS, with other disease. We want to create discussions about drugs and how could we assess the better alignment between the reaction and the intake and the reaction. So we want to really create a stronger network around us that would understand the uniqueness of the data and would create those kind of correct collaborations between, we are for-profit, it's a company, it's a startup, but with a very unique data set. And we are now exploring that idea with different partners.
Well, 3.7 years from now, you'll get FDA, and then you'll be off and running. And who knows? By then, maybe it won't be a device; it'll be an AI. So, but you'll still need some more hardware to make it work.
Yeah.
Do you read science fiction at all? By the way,
yes.
you do. So, did you read? This Alien Shore?
No, that by who?
Celia Friedman, C.S. Friedman.
No.
Oh, I'll send you the link. C.S. Friedman. So she wrote it's kind of like a space opera called This Alien Shore. I won't tell you the whole story because it's complex, but the whole idea is based on a society in the future where everyone has a very powerful processor implanted inside their brain at birth.
That's when I ask you what was your worries, I think that that's part of what we have to understand, and to understand that once you have a technology, it could be used in so many ways, like any technology. Let it be a brain implant, let it be a nuclear bomb, let it be whatever. Everything could be used in various ways, and what you're describing is actually. Maybe some of the companies has a vision to go that direction, and how does this changes society, humanity? How do we define who's human and who's not human? How do we create a line to say that's an extension versus that's actually, just a facilitator of something else? So I haven't read that, but I think that's that echoes with a lot of different perspective for a technology that penetrates our brain and open different things that you could do with that.
That's right. A lot of people have been thinking about that for a long time, and so I'll do you read paper? Or do you read on a Kindle?
I do paper.
You do paper. So no, that's not unfortunate.
I need to feel it in order to enjoy.
So you'll send me your address, and I'll send you a copy of the book. Okay.
Even the name would be easy, and then I'll find it.
No, I want to do that for you because I mean I feel like that's going to be my little gift.
I appreciate it. I appreciate it. Appreciate it very
my
much.
little gift to you. So, Rotem Kopel, thank you so much for being our guest on Life Sciences Today. We record every week, sometimes twice a week. We're getting a lot of people coming in and interested in the show. When it goes live, I'll send you the link, and I'm sure we are going to hear amazing things from you. And let me say goodbye and thank you.
Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure.